Hello, my name is Jeannie, and I'm the Community Library Manager at Temple City Library, which proudly resides in Supervisor Kathryn Barger's 5th District. Welcome to tonight's program. Before we begin our program, I would like to introduce you to our featured speakers. I have the honor of introducing Supervisor Kathryn Barger. Supervisor Barger proudly serves the residents of the 5th District, Los Angeles County's largest district, which spans more than 2,785 square miles and including 20 cities and 83 unincorporated communities in the Antelope, San Gabriel, San Fernando, Crescenta, and Santa Clarita valleys. Born and raised in the 5th District, Supervisor Barger comes from a family with deep roots in public service. She began her career in public service as a college intern in the office of former Supervisor Mike Antonovich, and rose to become his chief deputy in 2001, where she served until her election to the Board of Supervisors in 2016. She was re-elected for a second term in 2020. Building upon her work from her time as a chief policy advisor for the 5th District on health, mental health, social services, and children's issues, Supervisor Barger continues to advocate for service and programs to improve the quality of life for foster children, seniors, veterans, those with disabilities, and those with mental illness. Supervisor Barger is committed to keep our neighborhoods and communities safe, working with federal leaders, law enforcement officials, and judicial officers to implement vital public safety initiatives. As an advocate for providing local community resources, Supervisor Barger has spearheaded efforts to preserve open space and enhance parks, trails, recreation programs, facilities, after-school programs, and libraries, include our brand new Temple City Library, which will be opening to the public later this month. Thank you, Supervisor Barger, for joining us today. Next, I would like to introduce you to Skye Patrick. Skye Patrick was appointed LA County Library Director in 2016. In her role, she is responsible for the library's 86 locations, 18 vehicle mobile fleet, and the 3.4 million customers that use its resources. Patrick is committed to break down barriers and increase access for all. In addition to help LA County Library go fine-free and initiating several other services to help provide more access and opportunities for customers, Patrick launched the library's Icon Equity Initiative. The library's Icon Equity Initiative ensures that library service and programs address the needs of the diverse communities across LA County. Patrick continues to reinforce the library's role in the community as a civic and culture center, a hub for public information, services, and discourse, and an institution of literacy, innovation, and lifelong learning. Skye, will now hand over the program to you.
To join us, and there is Supervisor Barger. Welcome so much. Thank you so much, and welcome to our virtual program, Trailblazers program. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you, Skye, and I'm sorry it's not in person. It's good seeing you, and thank you, Jane, for that great introduction.
Right, thank you so much. So hopefully within the next few months, we'll actually be able to reconvene these programs in person. But for now, this is a way that we can still have a touch point with our customers. So I want to get into these questions. We have some incredible questions. We can't wait for your responses. I also want to make sure that I allot some time for our customers to ask you questions. So Mental Health Awareness Month, Supervisor Barger. This month provides an opportunity to reflect on the challenges and the challenges that many across the nation are facing, whether it's with the mental health trauma resulting from COVID-19 pandemic, racial injustice, or other social stressors. Why is it important for us to have this discourse on this topic about mental health, specifically here in LA County?
Well, that's a really good question. And I truly do believe one of the biggest barriers to increasing access to service is stigma around receiving mental health care. It is okay to say you are not okay. So I think it's important for us all to be advancing conversations around mental health in order to increase awareness for available services. And then to know when to look for the early signs of mental illness that may present themselves. I mean, I think that people think that, that it just is something that happens, but it can slowly, like depression, creep up on you. So I think that it's important for us to let people know that mental health care is best provided early and within individuals' communities, whether it be family, friends, and community clinics that are in your neighborhood. And it's focused on the individual. And the earlier a mental health challenge is identified, really the better chance they have remaining in that community. And when I think about it, I think of the cultural differences. So we always try in the county to build around that as well. And let me just say that COVID has also increased individuals' awareness of their own mental health needs, something that I know I've taken to heart as it relates to being a supervisor during the height of the pandemic and being the chair of the board. So I think it's important for us to break down the stigma and say to yourself, give yourself grace to say, I need help.
Thank you. I love how you ended that, giving oneself grace to say, I'm not okay and I need help. I just love that. Thank you for saying that. This kind of segues back into our next question. Can you provide some insight into the motions that both you and Supervisor Hahn introduced in April to support mental health legislation for LA County? And for those of you who aren't aware, is SB 970 and 988 Implementation Act. Can you talk about those two a little bit?
Sure. And the first one, to Supervisor Hahn's credit, is something that she spearheaded, and knowing my passion for mental health, I shared in writing the motion with her. So the first is 988. It's a federal mental health call line, similar to 911, and it will increase the accessibility of calling for mental health services and also remove the barrier to having to call 911 for these services. It's important for us to recognize that law enforcement is not always best equipped to deal with people in mental health crisis, and counselors are. So we are making it more accessible, but we're asking the federal government for more support to implement these new resources, because it is going to really have to be an investment by this county in resources into the communities. So we're going to need more crisis-based field teams to answer those 988 calls. And really focus on getting them into the community so people know that if a loved one is facing some sort of breakdown, that 911 is not the call to make, 988 is, and we'll get someone out there immediately. And studies have shown that this is the most effective way to address people in crisis. And the second thing we've done, the MHSA, which is the Mental Health Services Act, which some call the Millionaire's Tax, was something that provides a lot of resource, and the state has many funding streams to support mental health services. These funding streams were created decades ago, like the MHSA, and voted on by the voters, but they currently are creating funding buckets that restrict our ability to spend where the need is now. So we have asked for more flexibility, and our hope is that the state will be less prescriptive with the funding and allow us to use these funds to meet our needs in the community. And one of them is with this 988. 20 years ago, 988 wasn't something that was even on the radar. Now it is, but with MHSA funding, it's very difficult to allocate resources for things that we know are vitally necessary to address mental health in the communities.
Thank you, Supervisor Barger. So you mentioned maybe having the opportunity to fund programs like 988. Are there other programs that you can think of immediately that you would see as a shoo-in for this money?
Yeah, I mean, for those that still call 911, we have the mental evaluation teams, and that is where you've got a clinician paired with someone in law enforcement. And we're doing that not only with the Sheriff's Department, we're doing it also with cities who have asked for that resource. We have found that when law enforcement paired with a clinician comes in contact with someone in crisis, and responding to a 911 call, less than 1% end up being taken to jail, which is a win-win, because our jails are not equipped to deal with people, quite frankly, that need serious mental health support. And so we are able to direct them away from that system and into a system that is actually going to help them in the community. Again, I keep saying in the community, because really that is the most therapeutic place for people to remain, if we can get them the services they need to support them remaining in the community.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that, Supervisor. Thank you for that. It kind of segues into our next question. And you kind of answered this, but if you could elaborate a little, what can the county do to provide more mental health resources for vulnerable communities such as foster children, foster youth, seniors, veterans, people with disability, and our unhoused individuals? What do you think about that? What can we do?
Well, first of all, I truly do believe, Skye, that it cannot be a one-size-fits-all. Each community has different specific needs and barriers to receiving mental health care. So we collectively, and government alone cannot solve this problem, we need to work with our partners in these areas to identify how these residents can best be reached and introduced to services. And when you talk about foster youth, to add one layer to it, we need to really equip our community-based providers with trauma, understanding of trauma, because many of these foster children that are taken out of their homes have faced much trauma that, if not addressed, will grow and become something that will be a barrier to them really getting into the next chapter in their lives, if you will. So I think we need to have trauma-informed care, especially for our foster youth, because while on the outside they may seem happy, anyone that's been taken out of their home or away from their parents, even if their parents are accused of abuse, have been traumatized. And I think that that is an important thing that really carves out for foster youth and actually for homelessness as well. For those that are experiencing homelessness, that are unhoused, they also have faced much trauma while they have been looking for housing. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. We need to really focus on each and recognize that each has their own identity in how we address their mental health challenges.
Thank you, Supervisor. You've obviously touched a personal nerve of mine, so I certainly appreciate your insight here. Trauma-informed care community, this is what she's talking about. What do you see as the biggest barrier that challenge the county's effort to provide more mental health services to these vulnerable communities? Of course, you've mentioned 988, maybe that's one of them. What are some other barriers that you see that you've been able to identify that pose a problem to that?
Well, I'll talk first on the bricks and mortar side, and that is beds and field-based response teams. We need to build our bed capacity in order to accommodate those that are in crisis. We have a dire need for beds and mental health clinicians, and that's something that's not unique to the county. That's across the state, and I'm told across the nation. It's a statewide shortage, and it limits our ability to engage with those in need to provide a safe place for them to receive services. So there is more we can do locally, but we need the help from the state to address these issues. And I would also say, you know, when I look at barriers, it's also tearing down that stigma. Too many people have false pride in saying, I can handle it, I'm okay, and dealing with it without really accepting help. So we need to break down that barrier in order to get the bricks and mortar in place so we can actually get people the care they need.
Sure, thank you for that. And so one thing that comes to mind when you talk about some of these shortages in services, really what I hear you saying is it's not just money, but it's also people. It's also professionals that we need here locally, statewide, and nationally. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us as a support department to hear that and try to provide additional services to help with the educational component for people who maybe want to go in this work and just don't know how to. So and let
me just add to that, Skye, and you bring up a good point, because I think the reason why I bring in the state is Senator Wiener from San Francisco has got legislation that will pay people's tuition that commit to public service for 5 years in this field. And to me, that's a right step, because for some, the barrier to getting the education is a financial cost to do it. So I think we need to have skin in the game, both at the state and the county level. And to me, giving back to public service, as you know, working in the public library, you are a public servant. There's nothing more fulfilling. And there are many that want to do it, but the barrier is the cost. And so we need to really support those that want to go into this field.
That's incredible. I really love that idea. When I was younger, Supervisor, I worked for AmeriCorps, and it was I didn't make very much money, but I have to say it was like really my segue into public service, and it really changed my life. Some of those relationships I still have today. So anytime that the state would be willing to promote this kind of work in exchange for going to school for free at some point, I think it's a great idea. I didn't know that. Thank you. Thank you for that one.
Amen to that. Yep.
So we're going to just do a quick little pivot, a small pivot, and talk a little bit about how our department, libraries, can better promote civic engagement and advocacy around mental health. As you likely know, we have a lot of different tools that we utilize to try and help our customers who are experiencing mental health issues. What do you think we could do better to engage our communities around this issue?
Well, first of all, I think we have the best library system, definitely in the state, but I would argue the country, because of the passion of the people that work there. Libraries are important community hubs that are centers for learning, for job searching and workforce development, digital access, and quite frankly, communal engagement. We should take advantage of our library patrons, both online and in person, and provide relevant information for programs and services that can support mental health and wellness. And, you know, I know that you know this, Skye, but maybe that some people that are watching don't know this. A lot of our unhoused population spend their days in our libraries. And that's why I say that we've got the most incredible staff, because while their job is to work in a library, sometimes they become de facto social workers trying to help those individuals. And so we have an opportunity to really provide the resources and education to those that are using our library, whether they're in there for the day or they're coming in to look for resources, and really use that as a building block to address a lot of what's going on.
Thank you, Supervisor. I've also been known to say that libraries are about people, not about books. Books are a component of the library, but they're about the people, both the staff and the folks who use us. So thank you for that acknowledgement. Excuse me. How would you recommend those tuning in today to help contribute to the county's efforts to ramp up its mental health support services for its residents? I know you talked a lot about bringing us all back to the community. What would you say for community members who want to help but just don't know what to do?
Well, I mean, to me, it's be open-minded about mental health needs and share with those around you that the county does have a lot of mental health services available for our residents. We need to get the word out because many don't know, and I appreciated the video in the beginning that talks about Mental Health Awareness Month, but also gives a number that you can call if you need help. We need to get the word out, and you know, one of the things I'm pushing as well is to really get the suicide hotline information more readily available and in every publication we do, because we're seeing, again, because of COVID, suicide rates on the rise. And it's important for us to get the word out that if you are in crisis, there are people that care, and many of them are peers that understand and have empathy and understanding about where you are coming from. So I think that, you know, I believe we need to really focus on being open-minded about mental health needs.
Thank you for that, Supervisor. I just received a tweet about you in this discussion as you're speaking. So perfect. We are getting the word out in real time. I want to, again, do a quick pivot and talk a little bit about you and your career path. I find your career path fascinating, and I think that it's Well, I'll let the questions, I'll let you answer the questions before I make a comment. So in addition to all of your mental health advocacy, you have been a long time advocate for foster youth and veterans. So if you could share with us how you cultivated this passion for these communities, what happened in your life that made you interested in these communities?
Well, let me start with, I started 35 years ago in the county, and my policy area was foster youth, DCFS, public health, health services, and DPSS. And for those of you that don't know, in this county, almost 3/4 of our funding goes to the most vulnerable populations, which includes foster youth. So I got to understand the children coming into our system and realize that so many of our foster youth face immense challenges and barriers. And the barriers are what I want to break down. These are children and youth who've entered child welfare system through no fault of their own, and the county has become their de facto parent in many ways. I remind people, they are the next generation, and we must, as their de facto parents, we must provide the tools and resources to help them grow and thrive. And so foster youth is really near and dear to my heart, as I know it is with you, Skye. And I think it's important that we leave, when I leave office, I'm going to leave it better than I found it. And that means providing a foster system that has support for transitional age youth so that they don't transition out of our system onto the streets, that we make sure that we give them the tools to succeed. And then, of course, our veterans. They have given freely and selflessly, and I truly believe that we owe a great deal of gratitude to them for their service. And for too long, veterans have not received the attention that they deserve. And as someone who has a veteran working in my office, I can attest to the fact that the challenges that they face coming out of the service back into what we would call the normal world have challenges. And for those that have served in the Iraqi war, they have, again, the trauma-informed care. What they've seen is something that they can't forget. And so we need to support our veterans. And so those two are definitely ones that are near and dear to my heart, because I think if I didn't at least walk away with that, then I'm in the wrong job. Because having done it for so long, I've seen firsthand the impact that we can have when we do right.
Yes, I'm hearing this resounding impact and impactful work. I'll remind everyone on the call that Supervisor Barger does have a Veterans Resource Center in her district at the library in Lancaster. And we are now getting those services up and remobilizing those services. Of course, we had to demobilize during the pandemic, but that is a service that we're continuing and getting up and running. So certainly visit the Lancaster Library if indeed you are looking for veterans services here. Let's ask this question. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm gonna ask that I'm gonna try and tease out a little bit more about you personally. So you said that you've worked for the county for 35 years. Congratulations. I'm glad you're still here. Can you share with us how you forged your career path? I believe you started as an intern, and I believe we said that earlier. Talk a little bit about your career path, and what advice would you give others, again, who are interested in getting into politics, especially our young girls, I'll have to say, centering the Women and Girls Initiative? What would you say? What do they need to do? What do they need to learn?
Well, as you may know, and I think it was touched on, there are more than 10 million people who live here in the county. And it's my job to make sure that they are all getting the services they need, or at least the 2 million in the 5th district. But I tend to want to look at this holistically. You're right. I began my career in public service working as an intern for the 5th district. I did that my summers outside of college. That experience taught me that public service can really make a difference in people's lives. As an intern, I was answering the call when people called in and they were frustrated. They didn't feel like they were being heard. And my boss said, you don't have to give them the answer they want to hear, but you have to give them an answer. They have to know that we are working for them. And I worked in the previous, so when I graduated from college, I was offered a job in Supervisor Antonivich's office and began a policy behind public health, children's services, mental health, and welfare. So I worked doing that for 26 years. Even when I was chief of staff, I still kept my fingers in those issues because I truly have a passion for that. Public policy to me is something that can be life-changing if done right. The job has a lot of responsibility, but the ability to do a lot of good. And I really take each day and I say, if I do what's right, the politics will work out. And it's worked for me so far because I try to always do what's right. I work each and every day to serve the most vulnerable people, including our foster youth veterans, people that are experiencing homelessness, which is an issue now that is really talked about quite a bit. Sometimes it frustrates me because it's talked about in a very disparaging way. And these are individuals that are suffering on our streets. And then, of course, those that are experiencing mental illness. And what I would say to young people is, I really don't view myself as a politician. I am a public servant. The way I got here was having to go through the political arena. It's not for the faint at heart. But what I would say to everybody, if you, especially young women, are interested in running, when I ran, I was the only woman running against all men. Be true to who you are, and it's okay to trip. Get up and always pursue your passion. Never look back and say, "What if I had?" We live in an incredible country with incredible opportunities, and we are able to use our voice. And so I would tell anyone out there that's thinking about it, take the word politics out of it. Look at public service and know that anyone can. If I can do it, anyone can do it. I had never run for office before, and I was fortunate enough to win this race. And this truly is where my heart is.
Thank you, Supervisor. I love that passion. And what I take away from that response is that it doesn't matter what your background is. If you have a passion, if you have this desire to give back, then maybe politics is your arena, or in general, maybe public service. That's what I hear you saying.
Amen to that.
Supervisor,
Yep.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that pertain to the library before we move into our questions from our audience. Can you please share with us the book or books that have inspired you as you forge your career path forward throughout the years? Is there a book or a couple of books that you...
When I was growing up, I mean, I remember reading To Kill a Mockingbird,
Right.
and it had an incredible impact on me. I mean, when I think about Atticus, he lives by his principles and teaches others to live honorably, something that many right now could take a lot of lessons from. And the prevailing lesson that I got is to see the world from other perspectives before passing judgment. We are too quick to pass judgment upon others without looking at all perspectives. And when we talk about this office, I think one of the reasons why I have been successful in working with the labor and with all communities is because I want to hear other perspectives before I make a decision, because in the end, the decision I make is better.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm going to change this question just a little bit because I ask everyone this question. So I'm going to ask you, what are you reading right now?
Well, that's a good question. And Skye, unfortunately, given I'm reading a lot of reports, and so I'm trying to better understand, for example, homelessness. So I read a lot of nonfiction books that deal with public policy, which I know is not exciting for the viewers, but it helps me to kind of get a different perspective. So instead, I would tell people to read a classic that is relevant to all stages of life. We talk about mental health. I love to go to Vroman's in my backyard. It's a great bookstore where if I have downtime, I love to just wander the aisles. And there are incredible books dealing with mental health, with how, with COVID, I put on weight, how to, accept yourself and kind of get back into shape. So I think that there's a lot of incredible books out there. And even in our libraries, you've got, that, but one of the ones that I reread, and it's in my office, and it's actually, I think, a poster that you all have, is The Giving Tree. Something that I truly, also, it had a large impact on me growing up about The Giving Tree. So if you want something that's easy read, that'll kind of bring you back to really understanding what life is about, I would highly recommend The Giving Tree.
That's a great recommendation. And I forgot that that was your book on our poster. Thank you for that. So those are my questions for you, Supervisor. I do have a few questions here from the audience that I'm going to ask for them.
Sure.
So here is one, and you touched again a little bit on this, but if you could just expand here. So how does the county support school mental health for students K through 12?
Really good question. And it's something that I brought into motion because I think that with COVID, our youth have really suffered because they haven't had the socialization. They've been in school, and then the debate over whether they can wear a mask or not, and then vaccination, and it creates anxiety. And so we've instructed the Department of Mental Health to work with our school districts to embed individuals at the schools to help support. But also, I want to take it a step further and educate teachers and actually parents as well, signs to look for if their child is experiencing any sort of issues with going back to school. So we are working closely with our school districts, and Dr. Gerardo, our LACO, our LA County Office of Education Superintendent, has been instrumental in doing that and has been a great partner. But we have to do more because our kids really are having a tough time as it relates to going back to school and just socialization in general. We live at a different time.
Absolutely. I can certainly appreciate that as a parent of a young child who's gone back into school. Here's another question for you. What is the county doing to support communities who have experienced hate crime or discrimination due to the pandemic?
You know, and that's, with COVID, we saw a lot of good, but we also saw a lot of bad. And through our efforts, we are, we're working on working with the DA on hate crimes and educating people about where they can go to report hate crimes. Again, I think that it's about education and talking to communities because there's misinformation. When I think of COVID, the Asian community, the Chinese community was attacked, and I saw it on the news, and it was heartbreaking to me. And people walk by and are afraid to get involved. So I think that we need to do a better job educating. Racism is alive and well, unfortunately, and I think that we need to combat it by saying it's not okay and really holding people accountable. But government alone, I always say this, government alone is not going to solve this problem. As a society, we need to really take inventory in how we're raising our children and what we are teaching as it relates to the fact that, and again, I bring up COVID because I think that's the one that comes into mind for me right now, that even with our president making the disparaging comments that were the prior president making disparaging comments about China, only incited people more. So we all need to lead by example. And I, for one, do that every day, and it is not okay to hate.
Lead by example. I could not have said it better. Thank you, Supervisor. I have a ton of questions. I'm going to try and get through them here from our audience. Okay. So as so many of our mentally ill end up in front of a judge, I think is what that's meant to say, what can we do better to educate the judges, prosecutors, as well as the public defenders about the resources that they can use in lieu of incarceration? That's a great question.
I love this question, and I'll tell you why. Because right now we are debating the whole issue around diversion, and diversion is moving people out of the jail into the community, into programs and services. So we need to build a robust program within the communities in order to refer individuals. But we also need to educate public defenders about the resources that are available. And I had no idea up until 6 years ago or 5 years ago when the DA or when the public defender was going through some issues in their office, that there was not a connectivity between departments, letting them know the resources that are available and really connecting them so that their clients had access to it. So we are working on that, and I'm proud to say that our public defender is doing a fantastic job of providing those resources to our public defenders, and it gives them the resources because none of us want to see these people coming back into the courtroom. As it relates to judges, we work closely with the bench, and I would argue that the judges I know truly do want to provide resources versus jail. So it's important for us to work with community-based. The judges know what's available, and we need to do a better job of getting that to those that are coming before the judge to offer as opportunities for alternatives to incarceration. But we need to build a better program for diversion because it's not there now. And the clock is ticking because 40% of those individuals in our jails are suffering from mental illness. And many of them are in our jails, and I'm pointing behind me because the jail is that way, are in our jails because of their mental illness. And yes, they committed a crime, but if not for the lack of services, they probably would not have ended up in our jail. And that's why 988 is an important resource, and our mental evaluation teams are an important resource moving forward because we want to keep people out of our jail.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for that. I have another really incredible question for you, and I look forward to your answer here. What resources does the county have for family and children of individuals that have a mental illness? And so we know how to cope and help them. I love that question.
I have to say this has been the largest challenge, and I think that it's breaking the barriers, but also educating the community about where to go, because it doesn't have to be a county-run mental health service. We contract with Pacific Clinics. We contract with D.D. Hirsch. We contract with a lot of community-based services, and you have to reach out. They don't know when you're in crisis. You have to reach out to them, and so we have that in place, but we need to get the word out that it doesn't have to. People think that they have to call the county Department of Mental Health. They don't. They can call a community resource, and now within the county we have urgent care mental health centers. So on the All of You campus, on Martin Luther King, on Rancho Los Amigos, we're building one at LA County USC, and at Harbor. We are going to have access in real time. If you break your arm, you can go to urgent care. We're now going to have that for those that have mental health needs so that they can go in and get the services they need in real time.
That's fantastic.
And we also have therapeutic vans. See, we've got a lot going on. And those are vans that are in the community that if you call, for example, 988, it'll probably be dispatched for that. But right now, even if you call the mental health number that was provided in the video, we can send a van out that's got everything in it. So it's almost like an office on wheels. So it keeps it in the community and provides a safe environment for people to get the services they need.
Supervisor, I have so many people who want to ask you questions. I'm so impressed. I don't know if we shared this. We had 300 people sign up for this. It's a great number, over 300 in fact. Here's another question for you. And you did touch on this one, but I think this one's a little more specific. So what is the first and second step for a regular person who wants to get involved with civic life, but that does not want to run for office? What would you give what's your advice?
So I would say that there are internships available. I know the county has them. When I go out to my communities and I talk to companies, I tell them to offer internships. So I would say volunteer. One of the most rewarding things you can do, and Skye, you did it. You didn't get paid a lot, but I would argue you were volunteering. But that kind of, you cut your teeth experiencing it, and it gives you a great something to put on your resume in terms of what you did. And shop around, because I actually wanted to be a lawyer until I began public service. And then I realized that my passion was helping people. So I would really encourage you, especially with the county, we have internships. I know we have internships in our office. And I would say if you don't want to go into the political side, I will tell you that the power truly is behind us with the policy deputies that do the work in terms of research and putting together recommendations on policy issues moving forward for the county. And you can make incredible change doing that. And even within our departments, we have incredible individuals that are doing public service by doing the work that they do, whether it be a social worker, mental health worker, a librarian, public health on the front lines during COVID. So there are a lot of opportunities, but I would say get out there and volunteer and kick a lot of tires, because you may find that your passion is something you didn't even know you were interested in.
That's right. Thank you, Supervisor. Here's another question. What can we do to get more school counselor boots on the ground in LA for our troubled teens and our marginalized youth?
So as I stated earlier, this has been our greatest challenge, and COVID basically exacerbated it, because even pre-COVID, I know I represent the Antelope Valley, which we've had tremendous difficulty in getting a psychiatrist and mental health workers to go out to the Antelope Valley. So we have tried to offer an increase in salary in order to get them out there. But now with COVID, the shortage is even greater. And so we're looking at what I did in the Antelope Valley for social workers when we've had a problem with turnover, and that is working with our community colleges to build a curriculum around what is needed, and especially up in the Antelope Valley, so that if the curriculum is built through AV College, once they graduate, they want to stay in the community where they're from. And so that's one of the things we're looking at, but there is no question there is a shortage, especially with school counselors, because we're all competing for the same pool. And so we're competing with the private sector, and the shortage is there, and it's real.
Yes, thank you for that. Just another general sweeping question about school counselors. But here's one that I think is interesting. Are the LA courts going to have care courts offering rehab? SB 1338. I'm not familiar with SB 1338.
Yeah, that is what Governor Newsom recently unveiled, a care court model. And I am all in, as is Janice Hahn. We brought in the motion to say we are all in. We want to be at the table to build around this. I'm excited. The devil is going to be in the details, because it centers around conservatorships, and it's looking at our most vulnerable population on the street. And so one of the proposals that I had, and I'm hoping they'll pick it up, is because it's going to be biting off a lot, is maybe beginning with Metro and doing a pilot with Metro with care courts, because you get compassionate counselors and the court, to the question that was asked about the judges, that are really dedicated to trying to look at a holistic way of giving someone the care they need if they can't care for themselves. So I'm excited at this prospect, but again, the devil is going to be in the details of how it's built out. The legislation, I think last week, went through a hearing, and it's continuing to kind of percolate up in Sacramento. But I'm all in, because we're going to take every tool in the box in order to address the issues surrounding mental health. And it's not a one size fits all. And this is going to be specific for those that probably need conservatorships, but don't need to be locked in a facility, but need to be cared for.
Thank you, Supervisor Barger. That was our last question. And if I could just do a really quick recap of what Supervisor has shared with us around reducing and minimizing the stigma around receiving mental health services. She also talked about looking early on, watching the signs early on for mental health issues. The earlier, the better, she said. She talked a little bit about hopefully utilizing 988 for crises rather than 911, and that the MSHA was created several decades ago, but it's very restrictive, and she and Janice Hahn and the rest of the Board of Supervisors are trying to work to get those monies to be less restrictive so that they can allocate those resources in ways that are useful in real time. She talked a little bit about not all things fit under the same banner, not one size fits all, that each community is different. And the community is the partner for the government. And so the government can't do everything, but it really takes the whole village. She talked about the need for equipment to serve to address trauma and more trauma-informed care. A couple of other things here, a couple of takeaways. She talked about this idea of hopefully, excuse me, I lost my place there. Senator Wiener having providing opportunities for loan relief for people who choose to go into this work after 5 years. So certainly look for that. And of course, our libraries are community hubs. Thank you for that acknowledgement, Supervisor. Be open-minded. The county has a lot of services for people who are experiencing mental health. There is a suicide hotline that we spoke about a little bit earlier. And of course, I think one of the bigger takeaways is that 3/4 of our county budget goes to help the most vulnerable of the county. So with that recap, Supervisor, I thank you so much for joining us tonight. Any last words of wisdom or anything else you want to share with us?
No, I just want to say thank you for doing this, Skye. You truly have taken our library system to a whole new level. And I so appreciate the ability to talk about a passion of mine and know that it's a passion of yours as well. And I'm grateful to everyone for tuning in today. And I look forward to getting feedback because, as I said earlier, it's important to hear from everybody in order to formulate a response that's really going to be beneficial and constructive versus destructive. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I want to say thank you to the library staff, specifically the community education and engagement who put this together, who put Trailblazers together. If there's anyone you want to see, let us know. There's going to be a survey in the chat. If someone in the community who's doing amazing work that we just may not be privy to, let us know. We'll try and get them on the show. Thank you so much, Supervisor. Everyone, thank you for joining us, and please have a good night.
Thank you.